Welcome to the Master My Balance podcast. Join your host, Melissa Boyle, as she explores aspects of life that influence your financial well-being and personal growth.
Welcome to today's episode of Master My Balance. And today I am delighted to have with me Tom Murray. And Tom is an expert in all things got to do with the Fair Deal scheme. So Tom, thank you so much for joining me here today. I listened to you at, it was a recent CPT event that I attended with the LIA, and I was just blown away by your discussion on the Fair Deal scheme, which is why I thought I'd definitely have you on to the podcast to have a chat about. So could you give us basically a brief introduction to the Fair Deal scheme to get us started? What is it basically?
Yeah, well, look, I'm Tom Murray, as you say, and I run fairdealadvice.ie, and we're Ireland's leading advisors on the Fair Deal. And the Fair Deal scheme basically provides care, it helps fund care for people who need long-term care in either private or state-run nursing homes. The scheme is open to more or less everybody. Some people won't qualify if they're exceptionally wealthy, but 97% of people who go into care actually qualify for the scheme, and they're funded by the scheme. And what it is, it's a scheme that makes care affordable for all. And it covers every eventuality, whether you property, no cash, or property and cash. So it's very universal in that regards. The scheme itself funds 23,000 places a year approximately. There's about 10,000 people going in and out of care a year only. It's not a huge number. It surprises a lot of people because a lot of people think that, once you're 70, you're almost guaranteed to need long-term care. That's not the case. As I say, about a third of people between 70 and 100 end up going into care. So basically, how it works is you have to complete an application form, and the application form basically gets you, once you've that completed, you want to go 2 assessments. The first one being a care needs assessment, and that's just to determine that you actually have genuine care needs that can't be met at home. And that's because there's only 23,000 or so places, and the funding is scarce, so they need to make sure that the people who need care get the funding. So it's not really designed, if you think that the local nursing home is a very good sociable place to live, the food is great, and you're missing out on the crack and you don't go in there. It's actually designed for people who need care. Okay. So the second assessment then is the financial assessment. And under the financial assessment, you're expected to make contributions towards what we call the cost of care. And the cost of care is the Fair Deal rate for a nursing home. And nursing homes have 2 rates. They have a private rate and they have a Fair Deal rate. And in Dublin, the private rates tend to range from 1,600 to 2,000 a week.
Wow.
Which is quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
So whereas the Fair Deal rates are averaging at the moment around 1,370 a week. And what you effectively do when you get into the Fair Deal, you're making a contribution towards the cost of care. So if you're a single person, that contribution is calculated at 80% of your income. So whatever your pensions are, etc., rental, whatever, you pay 80% of your income. And if you rent your own house, that's excluded. It's not included in the assessment. That's exempt, okay, which is great.
So if you rent it, if the property isn't yours, do you mean, or
if you own your house and you're going into and you rent it out, your family rent it out, or you rent it out because it's going to be empty, that rent is not included in your financial assessment.
Okay, so that could help people, I suppose, pay that bit extra that they have to pay.
Well, it helps them it helps stop the money draining out of the savings account. You know what I mean? It goes against it. And look, the way in Dublin at the moment, in particular, the rents are 2,000-3,000, a month. So, if you're paying out a care bill, you've got that coming in on the other side, it does help. It does help. But it preserves your cash assets somewhat.
Yeah.
So you pay 80% of your income anyway, and then the second contribution is 7.5% of your assets, and your assets being your house, any savings, investments, ARF, pension funds, um, uh, second properties, and also if you've given away any property within the last 5 years, that's included as well in that assessment. And the first 36,000 of your assets are exempt from contribution. Now, so that's what happens for a single person. And and whatever that figure comes to, if that's less than the cost of care, so if the two calculations come out at say 1,000 a week, and the cost of care is 1,370, the HSE will give you a subsidy, which is free money of €370. Now, if you're a married person, you pay less. So you effectively pay 40% of your combined income, allowing 60% for the spouse who's living at home or the partner who's living at home, and you pay 3.75% of your assets, your combined assets. It doesn't matter who owns them, whether the account is in your name or your spouse's name. It's the combined assets. You pay 3.75% of those, less 72,000 again, and that calculation is your contribution towards the cost of care.
Okay.
So that's
Can I ask you, sorry for interrupting you there. Can I ask you about the disregard? Not the disregard you were saying is 36,000. Is that before the 7.5% is applied, say?
Yeah. So look, if your total assets are 136,000, they take 36,000 off, and then they have 7.5% on the 100. So you pay 7,500. And the asset disregard is first applied to your cash assets. Okay, so when they're doing it, they first of all apply to your cash assets. And if your cash assets are, say, less than 36,000, then the balance is applied to your property assets. Right?
Okay.
That's how it works.
Okay. And when you're saying there's that period where they can go back 5 years, say, and if you had assets or if you gave them away, they count that in as well. What about if they, like, with, say, their general spending? Say if you had somebody, maybe they kept their assets, but they had a lot of cash. Say if they're spending a lot of cash, is that taken into account of, like, the large amounts of cash they'd spend, or is it just a giving away of assets?
It's just really the giving away. So look, nobody plans to go into the nursing home tomorrow,
Exactly,
So, like, you could be living your life the way you want to live your life. You could be going cruises, you could be having holidays. You might buy a new car, you might decide to do up the kitchen, insulate your house, you can be doing all these things. And then
that's what I was thinking about. If somebody is like, maybe they want to go out and buy themselves a new car, is it going to come back to haunt them then? Like,
no,
if they...
No. And look, I mean, so that's normal. But like, if your kids 10 grand a year or 20 grand a year, or given the transferring houses, they all are meant to be included because they would have happened within 5 years. So that's not normal spending. That's kind of given, right? But like, the thing is, when you're in care, the important thing is nobody seals your bank account. Nobody says you can't spend your money. So if you are actually in care and you're part of a couple, if your wife or husband needs a new car, they can go out and buy a new car. You know what I mean? If the house needs fixing, they can fix the house. If they want to go on a holiday, they can go on a holiday. And the great thing is, every year that you're in care, you can ask for your savings to be reassessed in your investments. Okay? So if you started off, say, with 400,000 in savings and investments, and after year one, between paying your asset contribution and, lifestyle expenses, and maybe you have to put new windows in your house, whatever. And just say if your savings fell by 100,000, you can ask the HSE to reassess your savings, and then you will pay 3.75% less up to 100,000, in your assessment going forward. So, but if you don't tell the HSE, they won't know their savings are falling, and you'll end up paying too much, really. So if you're proactive, you save money. If you're not, you'll waste money.
Okay, so it's a matter of every year kind of making sure if their savings have decrease at all, that they go back to the HSE and say, can you reassess this? Maybe we got new windows during the year, a new door,
Absolutely.
20,000 less. So reassess it,
And if you're getting into big dumb, try to avoid cash jobs, because
Okay, yeah.
like if there's 20,000 out of your account and that was within the reassessment period, they would say, what's that? And you say, oh, I paid my bill of 20,000 cash. And, whereas if you have an invoice, it's a lot easier to prove it, to challenge it,
I get you, yeah. That brings us to the end of part 1 of our conversations all about Fair Deal with Tom Murray. Today was really about understanding the basics, what the Fair Deal scheme is, who qualifies, how the assessment works, and how contributions are calculated. In part 2, we're going to move into the real life side of this. So what happens when care is suddenly needed? We look at the financial assessments and the practical supports that can make a very stressful time more manageable.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Master My Balance. If you liked what you heard, then be sure to hit like and subscribe. And why not share with like-minded people? Until next time, you can follow us on all socials at Master My Balance. And we'll see you next time.